Welcome to the Power Monkey podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. We invite coaches, athletes, and industry leaders in our community who are willing to open up about their setbacks and successes to educate and inspire our listeners. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn. And on today's episode, we have two guests, both from the Champion Physical Therapy and Performance Clinic out in the Boston area. The first guest is actually someone who's been on a few times already and you're familiar with from our Power Monkey community. It's DPT Dan Pope. Dan is an absolute critical component to our camps and some of our materials with regards to what we add in from the PT side. He is also the founder of Fitness Pain Free and a great resource for all of those out there in the fitness community looking for PT help. Along with Dan is the president and co-founder of Champion Clinic, Mike Reinold. And Dr. Mike Reinold is one of the most important and a world-renowned leader within the sports medicine and rehabilitation world. He has been named to the 100 most influential people in health and fitness. He is the senior medical advisor for the Chicago White Sox and works predominantly within the baseball world, has a World Series ring from the Boston Red Sox. It's an awesome conversation. Talk a lot about baseball because baseball season just started, but it was great to get Mike on, and I hope you guys get a lot out of this one because hopefully we'll have both these guys on again sometime soon. Enjoy. I don't know how many of you out there know about our Power Monkey Camp, but it's absolutely a can't miss event. We do 2 a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. The next one is actually coming up the first week of May 2nd through the 8th, and you can register at powermonkeycamp.com. Now, the registration is only going to be up for another week, so I would highly recommend going there if you have any interest in attending. It really is an all-encompassing, epic adult fitness camp. It's held in CrossFit, Tennessee, which is smack dab in the middle between Knoxville and Nashville. And we have a beautiful 150-acre campus, 30,000 square foot of gym space, a 32-acre lake, 5-mile running trails through the woods, a ropes course. It is absolutely amazing. I'm not just saying that, being that we put it on. It really is something that I think if you come, you will leave saying, I want to come back to this thing again. In fact, we have campers who have come back upwards of 10 times because it's such an amazing experience, and we really try to treat it like a family. We have coaches and experts from so many different areas, from endurance, gymnastics, weightlifting, kettlebell training, jump rope training, rowing, as well as doing seminars on programming, nutrition, sleep, mental training. We do yoga in the mornings. We have open gym time. We do campfires with s'mores and beers at night too. If you were a camper when you were a kid and always wanted to go back to summer camp, this is it. Come to Power Monkey Camp again. Register at powermonkeycamp.com for more information. Hopefully we see you there in May. Well, Mike and Dan, thank you both for taking the time to be on the podcast with us. Dan, you've been with us a few times already and kind of know what we're doing. You've actually been part of the Power Monkey community for as long as we've been around. You know, you were one of the first people I met in the CrossFit community, and you kind of grew up with us. So our audience knows you pretty well. But Mike, you're new to us, and you're a rock star in the PT world, and I would love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better before we get into the questions. Would you mind doing a little bit of a quick background on who you are and kind of why you are so prominent and prevalent within the PT world?
Well, I think I'm supposed to start with a long-time listener, first-time caller type thing. But no, I mean, I just knowing Dan and Dave Tilley for so long, working together, we've always known of Power Monkey and all the great things that you guys are doing. So I really appreciate taking the time to get together today and to chat a little bit, because you guys are certainly so well respected and awesome at what you do. So it's really cool to be on. But man, to answer your question quickly, like how to get here, I mean, I don't know, just persistence and luck, I guess. But no, I mean, I've been a physical therapist now for over 20 years and, gotten some really good experience to work with a lot of injured people, a lot of healthy people trying to improve their performance. And, I'm just, fortunate to be at a point where now we have a nice performance facility up in Boston that Dan and I work at, and are just here to kind of share what we do with everybody now. Like, we love helping people get the most out of their bodies, and then we love teaching people how we do that as well. So it's been fun.
And you work with a variety of different backgrounds, but would you say that your specialty is working with baseball players specifically? And Can you talk a little bit about maybe your background as an athlete, and maybe did it lead to that specific kind of route?
Well, my background as an athlete, I think we're gonna have to start with 10U Little League because that's where it all began, to
All
be honest
right.
with you. I'm a two-time Little League champion, a two-time Pony League champion, Babe Ruth. I am a one-time adult recreational co-ed softball league champion. I do have a World Series ring, which is probably a little bit cooler than all those things. But I feel like I was more personally involved with that go ahead bunt when I was 10. So it was a good opportunity. But no, yeah, I mean, for me, I think as we all get older and we all do more and more of like a specialty and a niche, which I think we all do, right? You find that just enough of the people that that are perfect for your niche will find you that you just don't have time to work with other people. So
Mm.
unfortunately, if you actually like spend a day with me, it's almost all baseball players, some just generic shoulders, but just because we just it's just you get full. But yeah, I mean work with a lot of overhead athletes, rotational athletes, fitness athletes, that people that just want to again get the most out of their bodies. But yeah, you definitely get kind of pigeonholed into certain specialties, right? Which I'm sure you're all familiar with too, with your backgrounds.
Yeah, I would say so, and it's kind of that leads to my question here with regards to just sports specific PTs, and like you said, it's a little bit similar to what we do in terms of creating a niche within our world, teaching people technique revolving around our specialties. And we're seeing a lot more PTs become, like you said, rock stars. And I think the last like 5 years, probably, PTs have become just as critical to the athlete journey as the coach, as the personal trainer, as the doctor. And it's become this kind of conduit between the doctor and the personal trainer. And you guys have become critical to making sure that athletes are not only recovering, but almost preparing them for their specific sport. Now, do you think that PTs work best when they are specifically targeting a specific sport? So the way you do with baseball, maybe Dan does with the fitness world, and Dave Tilley does with gymnastics. Do you think it's imperative for PTs to be finding a sport where they can create a niche for themselves and dive deep into that? And then, because from my perspective, it's critical for an athlete to find a PT that knows their sport well. Because if not, you kind of get lost in terms of them not understanding the movement patterns, the stresses that happen. Do you find it to be imperative for the PT in this age to be targeting and to be a little bit more specific in the way that they're finding athletes into their niche?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about it, if you're the consumer, you're the end person, you're the athlete, if you have a very specific thing that you want to work on or you want to perform at, then chances are you're probably going to have to seek out a variety of experts to help you with that. So you need help with the coaching aspect of it, the skill of that, right? You need help with the recovery of that. You need help with the build up to that, like, coaching wise, not just skill, but programming to get up there. You need help with somebody that may be trying to get you back from an injury, but that understands the specific loads and stress that's involved in those activities. So, in the PT world, I think sometimes PT gets a bad rap because it's gigantic, right? That's like saying like, a haircut, right? There's a million different haircuts, like different barbers, different styles, salons. There's so many things you can do with your hair, right? That's the same thing with physical therapy. But there are people that are starting to specialize, like you said. And it's great to see, right? Because a lot of people are probably fitness athletes themselves or gymnasts or whatever it may be that their background is. And then they're looking for an outlet as they become a young adult and start growing up. So, for me, I think that the OG of this is definitely Dan Pope, though, right? I mean, he's probably one of the first people that, started this progression as a strength coach and then said, hey, I'm going to go back to physical therapy school, right? And then like, okay, I don't want to work with neurological patients. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just not where
Mhm.
our passion is. But then how am I going to like meld that? So I think Dan's like story on how he did that is spectacular.
Love it. Dan, you want to jump in there and give a little background?
Well, I think that's huge. Obviously, I lived that career path, so I believe in it. I think what's really challenging is that if you want the best possible care for a very specific problem, I'm going to try to send that person to the the expert who's the most qualified for that. It's funny because before I started working at Champion, I really enjoyed working with baseball athletes, because I'd learned so much from Mike. Like I bought all his continuing education products, listened to everything he had to say. When a baseball person came through the door, I felt like super competent in comparison to all the people I work with. Now that I'm Champion, I feel like an idiot. Like I don't know anything about baseball, and I'm the worst possible physical therapist compared to everyone else. But yeah, that's important because if I want like the person I'm working with to get the best possible care, and they're a baseball athlete, I'm probably not that person. Can I do a decent job? I bet you I could do a better job than most physical therapists just work in a standard outpatient setting. But when it comes to fitness, I know all of the minutia that's really going to make a difference for that athlete. And oftentimes it really depends because you may find that the standard physical therapist can help you with whatever pain problem you have. But if it's more specific, there's little nuances and you're not getting better. Oftentimes the person who has that experience is going to give you that one or two little tweaks that's going to make all the difference, that makes the whole physical therapy experience work,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of fruit by going down that pathway of getting a specific niche, whatever you want to call it, quiche, to help patients, athletes as best you can.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. Now, one thing that I want to kind of add on to that is just for the listener out there who's maybe not in the Boston area and can't just jump over to Champion to get, the specific care they need for maybe you, Dan, when it comes to fitness related injury. What's a recommendation for someone who is maybe in somewhere a little bit more remote in terms of being able to seek out someone who has sports specific background? Is there a route where you can kind of like help guide someone who is looking for that right PT to fit their needs?
Oh, you want me to tackle this one, Mike? It's tough, but to be honest, I think it's getting a whole heck of a lot better. If you've been on Instagram for the past 5 years, I don't even know how long Instagram's been around. Being like a fitness PT has gotten much, much, much more popular. And I remember back in the day when I was kind of considering trying to put these online pain programs up for people like you're mentioning that don't have access to good physical therapy, I was scared because no one else was doing it. And I didn't want to get sued, But what I will say now is that there are a lot of physical therapists across the United States that are very good at working in the fitness population. And I think as a community, we probably need to band together a bit better and foster these networks so I can say, oh, where do you live? Oh, you're in the Dallas area? Great, go see this person here. Or you're in Pensacola, Florida. I know of someone who's maybe 30 minutes away that can help you out. There are certainly areas where it's a bit barren, but I think far and away, it's probably just that we need to make sure that we're building this network that we can refer out. And we try to do that a lot at Champion. We do that quite a bit, pretty regularly. We're fielding questions about, do you know a good PT in this area, that area? There's a bunch of good Facebook groups as well out there. So I think that's kind of the way to go. At least in the United States.
Yeah. That being said, Dan and Mike both, how good of a job can you do online? I mean, we've all had to make adjustments. I do a lot of online coaching, video review, but also, online clinics through this last year. And I feel like to make that experience good and productive, you've got to be really good at what you do, from my perspective. But from your perspective as a PT, where, yes, as a coach, I'd like to have my hands on you, but even more so as a PT. So how good of a job and how effective of a job can you do to kind of get your points across or direct them to some demo videos of some stretches or mobility work that they can do? How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I agree with you. I think there's actually some limitations, and we're very hands-on at our facility because it works, right? It helps people get better faster. I think that's an important way to do it. But I am very pro somebody giving it a shot on their own, either through remote programming or remote sessions with a physical therapist, because I think it's probably worth it. I kind of call this like the corrective exercise bell curve, because theoretically it would just be corrective exercises because we can't do manual therapy based stuff. And 20% of the time you're probably gonna nail it, right? You're going to do a really good job with just those drills. Like, oh, your squat looks limited. oh, it looks like dorsiflexion breakout is showing some limitations. Let's do these 3 drills. That may work. 20% of the time it's probably going to work. 20% of the time you may make it worse, right? And that's where, just as long as your coach is humble enough and you can talk it through and just be on top of it and then refer them to somebody local, great. And then the rest of the time, that's the person that's just, they're going to give it a shot for 3-4 weeks, see minimal improvement, that type of thing. That's where I think you have a good enough chance to start, especially if you're remote, you don't have somebody near you that is qualified. But we are big fans of having a relationship with somebody near you, because you're probably going to need them again in the future, right? Like,
Right.
Dan, how many of your clients, just keep popping in, like, every now and then, because, they're working on like a new PR or a new skill or something like that. And then something flares up that's limiting them and they come back for something new. I mean, to me, it's about the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, Mike, I'm just wondering from your perspective and yours as well, Dan, how much of a responsibility of it is on the actual client to make the changes and do the things that they need to do, whether they're coming to you in person or whether they're online. Because to me, as an online coach, someone that does a lot, I mean, I sit here and do online coaching almost all day, every day. I know that really the biggest percentage of their progress is on them, even though they're online. And I'm not I get them to the point to where, yeah, I could do, we could expedite the process if they would come to me for 1 hour in person, but in the end, it's ultimately on them. Would you guys agree with that as well?
Yeah, it definitely is. Physical therapy is interesting. It's a little different than the fitness world. The large majority of people in physical therapy, the hardest thing to do is get them to make a change, to start them on an exercise program. We're in a weird space at Champion Physical Therapy. We work with mostly athletes. You guys know this. We work in the fitness world. One of the biggest problems I have in the fitness world is not getting people to exercise. It's stop doing too much and do a little more of the things they need to do, right? I'm sure you guys always talk about do more strict work, do more pause stuff, think about technique a little bit more. Most people just want to go to the gym and hit it as hard as they can every single time they go in there. So yeah, it does definitely fall on that individual. I personally think that my job is a little bit easier than the standard physical therapist, just because my people love to exercise already, and I just foster that positive, lifestyle and try to tweak it as best I can. But I've certainly had patients where I feel like the reason why they're not progressing is because they can't get out of their own way. They can't stop doing the stuff that's hurting them, right? Maybe not adding in the exercise I want them to do. You just try as best you can to make that change. But at the end of the day, it's really, really hard to change human behaviors, habits, lifestyles, whatever you call it. So yeah, that's challenging.
Chad, I get some, I think something that could help you with that, to weed those people out, is just increase your pricing. Right?
For sure.
That'll weed out the unmotivated, right? Because
Yeah.
not that you want to isolate yourself, but there's always going to be an unmotivated group, right? Or somebody that wants. I mean, that's why like some of those big box gyms that cost $10 a month just want you to, keep saying, this is the month I'm going to start. Yeah, I'm going to start this month. I promise. It's only $10. I'm going to start this month, right? So I think we're fortunate because, again, going back to the specialty conversation, like people seek us out because we're good at what we do, like all 4 of us, right? And I think that's the part that I think almost like weeds itself out. So if you're just getting started, you're going to probably struggle with that a little bit more, right? And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, certainly for me, it's just become part of the job and part of kind of a skill I've had to develop to accept that that's kind of part of it. And I, all my online clients are very dedicated, but to an extent, right? There are those little humps that we've got to get them over, like you said, to get them out of their own way, Dan, and stuff like that. So to me, it's just kind of part of the job and skill of directing them through that and getting them to understand how much of the responsibility is theirs and what they need to do and everything else. And here we are talking about fitness, and Mike, you're a baseball guy, so I want to bring it back to baseball real quick, because I have to wonder, since fitness has always been here, but you said you've been doing this for 20 years. Fitness is only really coming on hardcore the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years. So I wonder, say your correctives and the way that you approached fixing baseball athletes. Has that changed any since you started 20 years ago until till now? And how much does, if it's changed, how much does fitness have to do with that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Humbly, I think just all of us, like if we're not changing what we do over the arc of our careers, it's probably a bad sign for us, right?
Right.
But I don't. I mean, it's boring to not change what you do, right? So I think most of us are going to be self-driven to just keep learning and growing and kind of adapting ourselves a little bit. But I'm actually at now a new point in my career, and it's funny how you see like these different arcs. The new point in the career now is, believe it or not, it's not me that's changing now, it's the athletes that are changing now. It's a different age of baseball, just using that as an
Right.
example, but it's the same thing with fitness, by the way. It's a different age. They're doing different things. They're preparing differently. They're focusing on different things, right? And I mean, baseball is an example. Like the 80s was like, like nobody worked out, right, to
Right.
begin with, right? And then it turned into like the excessive steroid era, and you probably had like too much of a peak. Now then it kind of got a little bit more functional and athletic sport performance based, right? And then now it's just one thing, right? Velocity, right? That's it. That's like, so imagine, you guys, you pick one metric that's successful to be a successful, like, Olympic lift or whatever, and you just focus on that one thing over and over again. Of course, you're going to start seeing some wear and tear from just focus on one quality over time. So we have to evolve, right? But then as the game evolves, we have to continue evolving. And that's the hard part, right? At some point, I can't wait to be at the point in my career where I'm just like, you know what? I'm done evolving, right? Dan and I have talked about this. I'm getting close.
Yeah.
I'm done evolving. I mean,
Yeah.
it's too much evolution going on.
Yeah, it gets old after a while, but you've got to do it, like you said. And you mentioned it's all about velocity now. As a PT, with your experience and expertise, do you feel like that's a mistake? Do you hope that baseball adjusts back to something a little bit different?
Well, if you look at baseball, like just like anything else, there's a business behind it. And if you actually look to see who's running most organizations now, it's a lot of like Ivy League based people that are looking at data and analytics. And some of them have investment backgrounds. Some of them have like attorney backgrounds, those types of things. You put all these things together. They're starting to evaluate players based on data. So the players are starting to train based on data, right? And this isn't like too weird in sports, right? Traditionally, like with the NFL Combine, that was a good example, right? Like, so everybody just, you can literally go to a sports performance facility and just train to do well on the combine. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a good athlete, and it doesn't help you become a good football player, but you're just it's almost like you're studying to just beat the SAT instead of become a well-rounded individual. So I think that's what's happening in baseball now, is we've evolved, like the whole concept of how we evaluate players is evolving, right? And with fitness, I think the more competitive fitness gets, which is amazing that it's happening this way, again, you're gonna probably start to see that where certain athletes dominate, right? You guys are a great example, right? Like, with the whole crowds like CrossFit and all these other things, right? Like if you have a gymnastics background, you're going to do really well in a lot of these events, right? So you're probably going to start training to be able to do some of those movements and those skills, right? But if you were never a gymnast, like growing up, you don't have experience with that, I think you're probably going to be more prone to kind of having some issues with some of those training styles because your body wasn't developed that way, right? So I think we're going to see that in all of our different fields a little bit, and it's probably a good thing in the long run, because the next generation of people will probably be training well from the beginning.
So when I hear velocity, Mike, I think pitchers. I think, what is the speed of pitch coming in? Obviously, there's a lot of kind of nuance that goes into that, but is that specifically what you're talking about? Do you work specifically with pitchers, or when you're talking about velocity, are you also talking about bat speed? Are you also talking about, other components that go into velocity other than what maybe just a layperson like me thinks of, how fast can the pitcher get it to the mound?
Yeah, I mean, baseball is a chess game, right? And it's the pitcher and the batter trying to beat each other, right? So the pitcher is using velocity to beat the batter, right? That's kind of, the main point. I remember growing up when we were playing like wiffle ball or stick ball in the backyard, right? Like I remember like you were pitching, you're like, all right, look out. This next one's coming in 90, right? That's what we used to say. And then like 90 now is like unemployed, right? You are you are you're not a competitive athlete at that point sometimes. So it's evolving that. So it's pitch velocity, but then the batter has to combat that. So for them, they're looking at bat speed, exit velocity, launch angle, right? Because they're looking at now the metrics of like it's physics, right? Of at this velocity, if I swing at this angle, how much distance will the ball go? It's that scientific nowadays. So it's fun. It's cool to kind of like think that way, but like it's a chess game. So I hate to tell people, I know this isn't like a baseball crowd that's listening here, but the next step is the pitchers and they're now going to start to throw slower. And I know that sounds weird, but they're going to have the ability to throw super fast, but then they're going to trick the batter by going slower or with pitch, movement. Right? Exactly. It's just different, right? So it's a chess game, right? So we're talking velo now. Maybe it'll be different later.
So one person that kind of stands out, Ohtani, who's like just an anomaly right now. You know, he pitched 101 the other day and then hit a home run that had a bat speed that was, I don't know, like 116 or something. But like that's rare, would you say, an anomaly, or is that a sign of the next generation of baseball player that is able to do those things in combination? In the past, baseball pitcher did his thing, rarely got up to the, you know, you get a Bartolo Colon that hits one home run in his career and it's a national holiday. But is it going to be, what's that?
It's a meme or a GIF for the rest of our lives. Right?
Exactly. Is Ohtani a sign of what's coming next in baseball? Someone that's a little bit more able to do a little bit of everything?
I doubt it, just because it's so hard to be good at both. I mean, one thing I do know, well, I work so much with pitchers that they all think they can hit, right? But they, because they all grew up being, they were probably the shortstop, right? I mean, if you made it to the bigs, you're probably a good athlete. It's just so hard to be good at both. And then from an investment standpoint and an employer standpoint with the team, you're adding a lot of injury risk by batting if you're an elite level pitcher, right? And if you look at the salaries, like, a pitcher might be making 15 million where the second baseman's making 5 million, for example, right? So it becomes an equation. So I think that's weird. It's funny you mentioned Ohtani. What excited, and you mentioned the 101, which I did see. I was watching the game because I worked with the White Sox and they were playing the White Sox. He, what excited me more was his 92 mile per hour split finger, right? That and that's how he's striking everybody out, is going under the bat. You know what I mean? So it's funny. We see the 101 and it's cool, but the hitters have adapted. Everybody's just bigger, faster, stronger, just like in your world, bigger, faster, stronger, over and over again, and it'll keep evolving over time.
I want to ask another question that I think maybe we even brought up last time we spoke, Pope, with regards to longevity of these athletes and kids growing up and getting into sports-specific training super early. And, baseball is probably the hottest topic when it comes to kids doing one sport from 5 years old all the way up through high school and becoming injured. And you're seeing the number of Tommy John injuries is just like skyrocketed over the past 10 years or so. Do you have thoughts or anything that you can impart in terms of whether or not kids growing up should train sports specific early, or is it more beneficial from what you're seeing to have a wide variety of sport training the way that maybe we grew up?
You want me to go?
Yeah, you want to start, Dan?
Yeah, well, I'll be a little brief because I know we kind of addressed this before. Baseball specific is not my best, but obviously having a more well-rounded program is going to be helpful. I think that your problem that you're seeing a little bit in the physical therapy world is that we learn so much about acute to chronic workload ratio, basically making sure you're prepared enough for whatever competition is coming up. And I think because of that, some folks have this idea they need to continually have some sort of stress in their training that's the same, year round. I think in baseball, and Mike can kind of expand upon this, we kind of have the opposite. It's like the more often you throw, the more months per year, the more likely you are to get hurt, So there's this idea that we probably want to stay away from throwing for periods of time throughout the course of the year, which I think something like staying away from specialization does. I think the problem comes when you're dealing with these athletes that are so good you need to probably specialize at some point just to be good enough to get whatever that scholarship is or play at the professional level, whatever your goals are. So I think it's a tough balancing act. And the one thing I will say before I kick it over to Mike is that I think sometimes athletes that do the best are obviously the best athletically, but they can handle way more stress than anyone else, right? They just don't break. And that's important because you may have someone who's, tremendous athletically, but if they keep getting hurt, they just don't progress. They don't get to the point they need to. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody breaks eventually, Dan. That's why we're here. That's why you and I are here. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. We if you look and you polled all professional athletes right now, so the ones that made it to the elite level, they're almost all going to tell you that they didn't specialize early and that they played a variety of sports. Now, I'm not sure what's changed. I know the industry is driven on finances and travel teams and showcases and all these things. There is a big financial thing to it. It's about exposure to the athletes. And we try to tell a lot of our kids, especially the younger kids, like they're 12. We're like, look, nobody from the Red Sox is scouting a 12U showcase, right? Nobody from Vandy is scouting this showcase. You don't want to show yourself until you're ready to be shown too, which is interesting. But to that point, I do think you need to specialize at some point, right? And it's probably like post-puberty. It's probably when you want to start focusing, right? So we're a good example up in Boston. We have some communities that are smaller and larger. One particular town right next to us is gigantic. So you cannot make the football, hockey, and baseball team, right? Because there's so many kids that you can't be good at all three. It's very rare to be good at all three. Then we have other ones that are smaller. And if you're a good athlete, you're probably going to play all three sports, right? So sometimes we see it driven by that a little bit too. It's just gigantic amount of kids in certain school systems. And it's funny, about a year ago, so I tweeted this out and I got a pretty good response. The thing that I think's changed, that's the weird part, is people like me, I was like, hey, sorry, I made a mistake. Like 15 plus years ago, like we were part of the crowd that started saying like, hey, kids need to play multiple sports, right? We shouldn't just specialize in one sport. And you know what all the parents did? They play all the sports all year round, right? So and we were like, no. What we meant was in the fall you play soccer, in the winter you play basketball, you know what I mean? But what they're doing now is they're playing 4 sports all year round. We're like, we phrased that poorly. I'm so sorry. That was
you messed up a whole generation.
But we still try. So like a baseball athlete, for example, we will try to say like pick a complementary sport for the fall, for example, like soccer. Soccer is a great one, right? Like man, you're going to develop some good like energy system stuff, you're good like aerobic capacity, good leg strength and power. Like you're going to do a really good job being a soccer athlete and then translate that to your baseball game, versus spending all winter like playing basketball and banging your knees up and getting irritated. Like I want you to focus that winter on your upcoming baseball season if that is what your priority is. But in the fall, go play soccer, like have fun, be a kid, you know what I mean? Like compete a little bit.
Yeah, so having fun, obviously critical, and that just doesn't go just for kids. It goes for fitness enthusiasts in their 20s and 30s and beyond as well. Like they got to enjoy what they're doing to be able to maintain it and sustain it. One of the things you talked about is soccer as a good complement to a baseball athlete. Now, building energy system, building aerobic capacity, I can't imagine that that's hugely important for a baseball player, considering that running 90 feet is max of what they're doing generally in a baseball game. But do you find that to be something that has been helpful, building your energy systems and understanding how those work for a baseball player, considering the type of sport they do?
Yeah, that's interesting you said that. So like sports science is evolving and growing, right? And there's some teams in baseball that have tried to like adapt that. So, we go to Europe, we go to Australia, we look for like some of these lead sports scientists in the world, and they bring these people in from like football, rugby, like those types of sports, right? And the first thing they do is like, all right, we got to get everybody up with GPS. We got to put some GPS sensors on them. We got to track their workloads all day. And then you know what they find? They find that baseball is the most sedentary sport of like all time, right? You literally do nothing for 45 minutes and then sprint 90 feet and then sit back for 45 minutes. And, you get 4 at bats in 3+ hours, right? So, it's interesting to that, but you know what it is, Dave? And I know you guys get this. It's more about the recovery and not just between games. We know certain things like pitchers with higher aerobic capacity, just as an example, they're going to be able to stay fresh over the course of a game. Yes, like you don't run the ball to the plate. Like at one point in time, we had T-shirts made that said like, I don't run the ball to the plate, right? For the pitchers that don't want to do their conditioning, right? But it's more about building up the capacity to recover even between pitch, between inning, between game, and then over the course of a freaking season. Again, baseball's weird. We play 162 games in 180 days. It's crazy. It makes no sense, right? Like people take it for granted all the time what goes into a baseball season. Like you watch the game, you know, you go to work, you come home, you put on the game, it's cool. You go to bed, you wake up, same thing. And you're watching again, you're like, whoa, they're in Anaheim now? How'd they get to Anaheim?
Yeah.
Like that happened while you were sleeping, right? So to be able to like have the capacity to do that is actually pretty helpful.
Yeah, I mean, baseball is kind of an anomaly when it comes to the season. Just a little side question for you, being so in there, I'm a baseball fan, and I just enjoy it. I'm an enormous Mets fan, so I'm excited for this.
It's hard to be
season.
A Mets fan.
Oh, my whole life has been hard. My whole life has been hard. This season, we got something special going on. We got something special.
I agree. The Mets look good this year. I think you're good. The NL's not going to be great. I don't want to date this podcast, but that Tatis injury might help you guys.
Yeah, well, NL East is not the easiest place to come out of. But in any case, the shortened season from last year seemed like a lot of players liked playing the shortened season in terms of wear and tear on the body. What do you think in terms of potentially baseball moving away from 162 game season and moving into something a little bit shorter? Is that even potentially on the agenda after seeing last season, or is revenue driven mindset a little bit too much of a component?
It's a business. I mean, you can't really cut back at this point. It's a business. So, I mean, it's already ridiculously expensive to bring your family to a baseball game, right? So, you know, it's tough. But that being said, as a fan of the game like yourself, I had a blast last year, right? Like every game mattered.
Right.
So like it was interesting. Like it's, you know, April, May right now, your team goes on like a 3-game losing streak. You're like, we got plenty of time, right? But like in a 2-month season, it was fun and exciting. So unfortunately, I don't think that's going to go anywhere just for, you know, the economics of it, right? But you know, I do agree it was more fun.
Absolutely. And I probably talked baseball the whole time, and I don't want to leave Dan out of this. So
fine.
I
want to get really quiet when they talk about baseball. So.
I want to get back to another
podcast episodes where that happens too.
Yeah, right. I have no doubt. Especially with baseball season just starting, right? Everybody's excited. But the role of the PT, in my mind, in my estimation, has always been a reactive industry, right? Injury happens, PT comes in, savior, figure out what tools we can get the athlete back into training. It seems like things have changed a little bit with that mentality, and the PT has become a little bit more proactive in the approach and a little bit more saying, how can we prevent these injuries rather than always trying to be a resource once the injuries occur? Now, have you guys seen that and kind of do that regularly? And does that mean that you work more closely with coaches and personal trainers now more than you did maybe a decade ago to help create plans to be preemptive and proactive when it comes to injuries?
I'll start with this one. I won't say it's changed much for me because this is like my entire life goal going into physical therapy in the first place. I started in the opposite place, right? I was a coach. I wanted to learn more about injuries. It's funny now because I'm almost trying to get people off of my programming and onto the programs of like someone like yourself, Dave, or Chad, just because it's too much. I have too much stuff going on, and I still write some programming for folks. But yeah, that's incredibly important. And for years and years, I continue to do this, but I sell programs. I sell programs online for folks that want to get bigger, stronger, faster, better at CrossFit, whatever it is. I think one of the issues we'll use CrossFit as an example, is that it has so much variability, right? I mean, CrossFit, constantly varied. It's a big part of what they do. Having a crap ton of variety in your training program is also something that probably is related to injury, right? We have quite a bit of research to show this. All these spikes that happen in training volume can lead to injury. And a lot of times it's masked in CrossFit, because you may find that someone goes to the gym 3 times a week for 60 minutes. So it always looks like they're doing the same amount of work, but you might have one training week where they do like 300 snatches. The next week they do none. The following week they do 500 wall balls, and it just changes so much. So as a, a personal trainer slash strength coach slash CrossFit coach, and now a physical therapist, I see that. I'm like, that's probably going to get people hurt. And the other thing you see, and one things I have to keep in mind is I'm a physical therapist. I'm an injury magnet. It's not like everyone gets hurt in the gym, but when you have people that come in every single day and say, I was trying to get better at handstand push-ups, so I started doing handstand push-ups 3 times a week, and they don't change anything else in the program, and now they have a shoulder injury, you start to learn these mistakes. You start to figure these things out. So I think what happens is you get this tremendous insight. And, for years and years, I've tried to spread this information. I think what's really, really challenging is that the coaches need to learn these principles, but they don't care about these principles. They care more about, what's that sexy, Olympic lifting drill? What's that cool, gymnastics program? How many repetitions can I do of handstand push-ups? How much weight can I put on the bar and do a cleaner deadlift? What's going to allow me to lift more weight and be a better athlete? And to be honest, not getting hurt is an incredibly important part, for all athletes, but especially ones that are more injury prone that keep on coming to my office. And I think the biggest issue is not necessarily that we don't know how to correct a lot of these. It's that we don't want to learn. I did a program on how to help pregnant and postpartum women in the gym because it's a tremendous problem. But how many male coaches want to address that? They don't, and that's the short and the long of it. So, I think it's very, very valuable that physical therapists have this insight. But I think that coaches can also use the same insight. They just need to value it more. And some do, some don't. That's always been a challenge for me. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but
yep.
Yeah, it's just tough to find I can kind of understand from the point of a CrossFit coach, for example, that's all they do. They coach the Olympic lifts, gymnastics, anything that has to do with CrossFit. That's what they coach. That's what they do. They coach CrossFit classes. And so they're so focused on that they lose sight of some of these other things, as you mentioned. And for the say the individual that is coming in 3 days a week for 60 minutes into a CrossFit class, they don't know any better. They're just following the program that they're being given, so I think there's got to be some education in that regard as well. And I think there is more of that happening, but again, it goes back to the responsibility of the athlete, the person that's doing fitness in a 3-day-a-week fitness class, but it's also the responsibility of the coach to lead them to that information.
Yeah, it's huge. I'll just jump in on one thing you said, that it does certainly come down to the athlete. I know a lot of coaches that get really, really hard on themselves, and some that are the opposite end of the spectrum, which is not good either, for injuries that occur in their gym, right? But a huge chunk of the injuries I see are folks that, like you said previously, can't get out of their own way. They're doing too much. The ego's too big. They're not listening to the coach. They do whatever they want to do. And that's hard because you're trying to make that change in that athlete's mind, and they don't want to make that change. They like what they're doing currently. So yeah, it's as much responsibility for the individual as it is for the coach. And I think the problem with humans in general is that we don't care about injuries until you get hurt. And then it's the most important thing, right? How many people have you seen where that's the case? Like they don't think about it whatsoever because they've never had a major injury. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times they forget, like I got hurt at this point and I'm feeling healthy and I'm going back to all my old habits, and I don't care. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of a human issue. Like we don't value that as human beings sometimes. So I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things that I find to be so helpful for my career as a coach has been to pair up with you, Dan, and with Dave, and implement the tools that you guys use with your clients on a regular basis into our training plans. And to be able to say, here are some correctives that you can use as part of your warm-up, as part of your training towards the technique work that we're going to be doing in the gymnastics world or the lifting world. And I think it's one of the missing resources that most coaches can implement. You're saying that most coaches don't want to do it. But is there a recommendation that you can possibly give to a coach out there that feels like they have every tool in the world when it comes to technique, or access to every tool in the world when it comes to technique, but maybe needs a little bit more guidance in terms of implementing some of the PT work? Would you say just jump in and check out the plans that you guys are selling, or is there a better route to be able to kind of merge those two worlds?
I love what you just said right there with how you're a better coach and you use a lot of things that you've learned from Dan and Dave over your career, I think we feel the same way. I know Dan and Dave think the same about you guys, right? For what they've learned from you. And I know I'm a better physical therapist because of all the strength coaches and skill coaches that I've worked with over my career. So, you know what I think it comes to, like with this, is that yes, you can seek out some of these resources, but if you're a coach, it's about finding somebody that you can collaborate with, right? Somebody that you can not only just help your clients get better together with, but more importantly, that you can geek out together a little bit, right? And you can grow together and learn. To me, I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah. I obviously think the answer is giving us more money. I think that's going to help your career.
That's right.
No, but yeah, exactly what Mike said. You know, obviously I'm biased because I saw this tremendous problem as a personal trainer. Like even if you get the best personal training certification, I get someone who asked me on Instagram this morning, how'd you learn this? Did you take your CSCS? I'm like, yeah, I took the CSCS, but I didn't learn this. I had to figure out a lot of this stuff by following other people and following other sports where they actually have some research on this and make my own systems and figure it all out. So if you're looking for something that's very specific to being a better coach to help to reduce the likelihood of getting injured, that's exactly what I write about and have been doing for the past 10 years or so. You know, not that I'm the only one. There's a lot of people that are doing this now, but it's a very kind of niche-y type of education that you're not going to get with most of the certifying bodies out there right now, at least as far as I know.
All right. So jumping to handstands, which we'll spend the next hour and a half on. I find handstands to be incredibly helpful for just about everybody that I work with, not just people looking to become better at inversions. In terms of building shoulder stability, in terms of building better overhead positions, I always tell people that working on handstands does not necessarily mean that you have to get upside down, right? There's a lot of handstand training positionally, strength-wise, that can be done horizontal, that can be done at angles. Have you guys ever implemented handstand training for shoulder work in general? And has it ever kind of crossed your mind to see the benefit, potentially building some range and stability with using something like a handstand?
Before Dan gives his dissertation, which I know is going to be amazing, I love when he goes off like that. I'll say this: do you know what type of person likes yoga?
Which type?
Flexible people. Right. Like, so people that aren't flexible don't enjoy yoga. And if you look at everybody online, that's like a big yoga, advocate, right? They're super flexible. They can do crazy things. I think you guys, especially you, Dave, right? You probably take for granted how physically challenging getting into the right position is for some people. Right. And I think that's an important part. So I would just say this, I think a lot of people haven't earned the right to train in that position, especially with like an uncontrolled environment, like being inverted, like you say. I like that. I was going to say upside down, but inverted sounds way better. But but you know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people haven't earned that right yet. But again, I'll let Dan take it from here on your crowd, because there's definitely that career progression that somebody that's into the fitness, athletic movements and skill-based things will get there, and I'm sure it's going to be needed. But I will say a lot of people getting started probably haven't earned the right to be in that position yet.
Fair enough. Dan?
Yeah, I think you had said, I'm trying to figure out your meaning behind this, but I think in terms of handstand training, I think from a physical therapy perspective, it's probably just like any sort of closed chain strengthening. So if you're in like a push-up position, doing a push-up, or any sort of movement where your hands are fixed and your body's moving, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a handstand. And obviously, like when I went to Power Monkey Camp for the first time, my eyes were just open with all these possibilities of crazy exercise you can do related to the handstand, but aren't exactly like handstands, right? My answer is totally different because I have a whole bunch of people that are trying to get back to doing handstands,
right?
And we have to give them handstand specific stuff. But what I will say is, let's say someone has shoulder pain. One of the first exercises I'm usually giving to them is some sort of like plank position with a shoulder tap, which advances usually to some sort of crawl variation, which eventually we're working towards maybe a wall walk, right? Or weight shifting. We're in a push-up position, or, feet partially over your head on a box, pike position, wherever that is. And eventually turns into actual handstand stuff. And to Mike's point, some people are already very good at handstands, and that's a phenomenal rehab exercise, right? For someone who wants to do more handstand work, right, but they don't have that balance, they don't have that ability to get overhead easily, it might be a terrible exercise because they have no balance. They've never been there before. Their body's not prepared for that position. But that being said, I think for carryover to, let's say, CrossFit for sure, but even something like Olympic weightlifting, you're stacking your body overhead, you're putting all that weight on your shoulder, you're building strength and control, usually in a very stable way, right? It's not like, Dave, imagine you're not going to take a 45-year-old man or woman who's never been upside down and have them kick upside down and hold for as long as they can or shift left to right, uncontrollably. Generally, it's very controlled, and you're working with the person at the hardest variation they're able to handle safely, right? But yeah, that's going to be phenomenal for preventing future injury if you have good progressions that are safe over the course of time, and you're working on building good positions, and you're improving your technique, and all sorts of good things happen with that. So,
yeah, from my perspective, the way that I really look at these types of things, and I'm not sure if this is somewhat what Dave had in mind or not, but I feel like for any athlete in any sport, baseball, we've been talking about baseball, right? Football, whatever it is, that wants to be the best that they can be at that sport, they should be capable of doing a good quality handstand. They should be capable of doing a full depth squat. They should be able to pause in the bottom of their squat with heavy load, breathe and speak freely for 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then stand up out of it. They should be able to do bench presses without hurting their shoulder. As much as I hate to talk about bench pressing, but the reason why I bring that up is because I had an athlete that was working with me on the Olympic lifts, and she had some upper body strength limitations. So I was having her do bench presses just to get some general upper body strength work in to ultimately help her Olympic lifts and get her stronger, prevent injury and everything else like that. But every single time she bench pressed, she got hurt. It would hurt her neck, and she had to back off. We had to adjust things for a number of weeks and try to slowly progress back into it. And so for me, I'm trying to figure out why bench pressing is hurting her neck, because I'm not going to say, you know what, just because it's hurting you, we're not never going to do it again. I want to dig into it and find out why, because if you want to be the best that you can be, if you want to be healthy and the best overall athlete, then you need to be able to do bench presses without it hurting you. So I think that's the way that I look at things. And so it's not necessarily about not doing movements, but saying, okay, maybe baseball players don't need to do a whole lot of handstands. There's a lot of other things that they can do. But if they were to kick up and they have a complete lack of ability to do that, then wouldn't there be some sort of limitation that will potentially lead to quicker injury?
You know what? I actually think I'm going to reverse hack that a little bit and say I do think if an athlete has the capacity to do all of that, then yeah, they're in a great position to be a well-rounded athlete that's going to do really well at their sport. I think the challenge comes into, again, this is like Dan saying that he only sees injured people, right? I think you see a lot of people that are good at these things. We're often dealing with competing stress, and we're trying to figure that out. And we don't want to, like, say, for example, take like a baseball player that's proficient at baseball and been doing it their whole life, and then, like, for example, like, say, like, we're going to now teach you how to do a handstand, just as an example, because it's different for them. It's new for them. We may not have the capacity to work on that. But if they had done that growing up, then yeah, I agree, they're a well-rounded athlete. I don't think you need that to be a baseball player. Like, to say that, like, and this is probably the wrong crowd to admit this, but like, we do not Olympic lift our baseball players, because
that's gonna be my next question.
well, it becomes a risk reward ratio. And the number one thing, let's just even talk about front rack and clean position. Like, if you just kind of like get into that, like, a lot of our athletes, so baseball players tend to have a little bit more of a carrying angle, so more valgus on their throwing side. So even just getting into a front rack position for them puts torque on their medial elbow, but more importantly, their ulnar nerve. Have any of you guys ever felt like a tingle in your pinkies when you're doing that? Right. So we try to avoid stuff like that, right? Because every time they pitch, it's at near capacity, meaning like they're stressing their body to the most. So we don't want to train at something that is doing that. A ligament, as an example, this is getting pretty deep here. A ligament's not a structure that handles stress like a muscle or a tendon. So we oftentimes want to build capacity in a muscle and tendon so that way they can absorb more stress in the future. If we're pushing a ligament to failure with all their activities, it actually fails. Right? Like, so like for muscles, it's easier, right? A failure for a muscle is like tearing it. That's super hard to have like a full tear, like a quad rupture, for example. It's super hard to do that, but it's actually a lot easier to do that when you're pitching this, right? That's why there's Tommy John injuries like all over the place. So for us, we just say, we take a huge step back and say like, well, what quality are you trying to train with the clean, and how can we emulate that with something that doesn't put you in a front rack position? So it's not the clean that we care about, it's the valgus torque and the stress on the ulnar nerve in the front rack position, just as an example. So we say like, all right, well, what do we do? And then, not to get too deep in here too, but like, again, the qualities of a baseball player isn't super vertical, it's more linear and rotational. Right? So it's about spending our time training the qualities that are probably most applicable to the translation of force into their sport environment.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, is there, because I'm looking at that from the outside looking in, and I'm thinking, and this is just my mindset, I'm not a PT, so maybe this is completely wrong, but I'm thinking, oh, they shouldn't be in the front rack because it's going to hurt them. I'm going to attack that. I'm going to have them maybe not do cleans, but I'm going to have them do some front squats, maybe not very many, but at least occasionally, and slowly progress and build into that to try to prehab, so to speak, to try to create some injury. And maybe they don't have the time and the ability to do that, or the knowledge, with the group of people that they're working with, especially in general, and all the, there's misconceptions in every sport, and in weightlifting, there's so many misconceptions that I deal with all the time. And, I've come across some, collegiate baseball players, for example, in the past, that come in and do CrossFit, and they're like, after they realize it and after they do it for a little bit, they're like, oh man, I wish I would have been doing overhead movements my whole career, because I feel so much stronger and healthier from doing that. But, without digging too much into that, are there some base movements that you feel baseball players should be capable of to be the best that they can be? For example, just some basic movements, like a good quality push-up, not even a handstand push-up, a good quality push-up, because this just makes me think of my wife, who blew out her elbow about halfway through her career, had surgery, and she was able to come back and everything else. But what we realized when we got into the CrossFit community, we were both about 30 years old at that time, and she started doing more CrossFit. And keep in mind, she was an alternate on the Olympic team. She's very high level athlete, lifting a whole lot of weight. And we realized that her upper body is extremely weak, extremely lacking. She was very strong in the legs, very fast, but no stability, no strength overhead. She couldn't even do a strict pull-up. She could barely even do, I think when she started out, I'm not even sure she could do a push-up that was on her feet, So
I can't believe you married her with all those
her legs, her legs are big and powerful and strong. But what I'm saying is that, to me, it's apparent that led to the injury that she had and limited her overall ability. And so I'm just saying, like, if there was a baseline test that, say, a weightlifter could do, that is outside, yes, we're going to have some baseline test in weightlift, with barbell movements, but that's outside of those movements, like a push-up and a pull-up. Like, as an athlete, to be the best that I can be, to lift more weight, and I realized too, I should have been able to do more pull-ups. I could only probably do at my best, and I didn't do them a whole lot, but I'm guessing I couldn't have done more than 10 strict in a row. And when I started doing CrossFit, it was, maybe 5 or less. So there was a limitation there on my part. When I first started doing CrossFit, I think my mile time wasn't even 8 minutes. I couldn't sprint with any action for a minute straight. And when I realized that about myself, I'm thinking, well, not just as a weightlifter, but as an athlete, but as an overall healthy, good athlete, even though it's not specific to my sport, I should be able to sprint through 1 minute of burpees as hard as I can. that's going to indicate more health, more longevity, like you said earlier, more recovery ability. If I even have just that little bit of extra capacity to take into my weightlifting training, so I'm just looking at those things, and I'm and back to my question. I know when I went off on a rant there, but are there any?
I was going to say I need to take notes to make sure we can.
are there any baseline tests in that regard for baseball players? I mean, to be honest, there's not for weightlifting, and there should be.
Yeah. Well, so I want to hit a few of those things there. So first, I would do the exact opposite of you. You would intentionally put them front rack. I would give them a safety squat bar and just say, get after it.
Sure.
Because I really don't care about what position the bar's in. That's the least important thing for me in terms of the outcome of the exercise, right? I care about the lower half and what's happening with the power, the force development, the strength that we're getting from that. I really don't care about the position is. So I'm going to take off one that might be causing their pinky to go numb because,
sure.
But here's why, Chad. Here's the big thing. I need them to throw a ball, and I'm paying them to do this. I need them to throw a ball tomorrow. Right. So if I get their pinky numb in my exercise when I could have just selected a different exercise, then that may inhibit them in the game tomorrow. And that's one of our big things. Right. So to your point, where a lot of ex-baseball players will get into competitive fitness and CrossFit based things down the road and love it and feel more stable with their shoulder with overhead lifts. I agree. I do too. But it's really hard to train that because it's such a competing stress while they're pitching.
Right.
So I think that's the real issue here is just like you with the handstand. Look, if you grew up doing handstands and you're good at it, then I don't think that will be stressful for you as a baseball player. Right. Does that make sense? But it's all about what you're accustomed to a little bit. So, for me, I think to answer your question then is what do we look at or what movements do we need to achieve? Right. I think some of the things you stated there where you're looking at the tool and not the outcome. So meaning you like the clean, for example, where I just like vertical force development, just as an example, right? And so what we do is we take a step back and say, I don't really care how you achieve that quality, but I want to focus on the quality and not how we get there. Right. So heck, we can do anything to kind of achieve that. So I mean, specifically to answer your question, I mean, we think we have a movement screen that we do at Champion. We think that you should be able to do a good generalized variety of movements, but it's very basic: hinge, squat, push, pull, lunge, step, right? Those types of things that you should be able to efficiently do. But then I think we focus more on the quality than how we train that quality. I don't care how you get to your end goal as long as we're getting from point A to point B as quickly and safely as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. One thing I'll add too is that, working at Champion, there's been so much reverse hacking of how these injuries occur, right? We have so much knowledge about how you hurt your Tommy John, how you have a slap tear in your shoulder, how you create all these rotator cuff problems. And then we have a very in-depth kind of prehab program for those folks to help them with those specifics, So Chad, I get what you're saying. Can we go in a front rack? Can we beef up this ligament, spend some time there, get some stress on it, get it stronger? A, maybe not. We might not be able to do that because it's a ligament, like Mike was saying. But B, we're already doing a lot to try to get that as strong as possible. And like Mike is saying, it's a risk reward thing. Is that the best exercise? Maybe not. It's a good movement. We love cleans. I do cleans all the time. But we already have a really robust system to try to prevent those problems and beef up the elbow as much as we can. So
yeah, absolutely. I get it. I mean, I do the same thing with, trying to get people to move a certain way with the Olympic lifts. I want you to move like this elite lifter does. And we're going to have to do a lot of individualized drills to get you there. I'm not going to give the same drill to every single person. So in that regard, it's kind of individualized. But yeah, I get it. Absolutely.
Well, guys, we're getting towards the end of our time here together, and we had a couple last minute questions if you're cool sticking around. Dan, you've done some of these before, maybe got some updates from the last time we had you on. But first question I got from Mike, I just want to know, where'd you get the World Series ring from? Is it with the White Sox?
No, with the Red Sox. So 2007. So you see, I'm dating myself big time. 2007.
That was a special year.
It was, I still think one of the better teams. I'm trying to see what I have. I got a lot of weird stuff. Still have my my popped cork and my goggles that got champagne all over it. But yeah, no, I still think that was a fun team. But yeah, I don't know. Big hopes for the White Sox though these next few years. The rebuild is complete in here. Look out, Mets fans.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll meet you in the series. We'll see you there. All right. Next question. I know your answer to this, Dan, so only for Mike. What sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Weightlifting for me, just because like I'm bad at gymnastics.
Damn it!
I'll take that.
So, Chad, I have to mention this. Last night, I actually asked my 4-year-old daughter that question.
Really?
She said she wants a barbell. She said weightlifting. I'm so
really
embarrassed.
You're gonna admit that?
I've done a terrible job as a parent. I've done a terrible job.
Wow.
She keeps saying she just wants to be good at barbell work. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who told you this?
We're gonna have to interview her. We're gonna have to interview her on the podcast, so I get another point.
Yeah, you're not getting a point for that one, but I just have to mention because I know she's going to mention it to you at camp, and she's very excited to be able to say,
"Oh yeah."
Chad's like got the Alexa controlled.
Hey, we'll bring a little couple pound bar with us, and we'll have Jody teach her a little bit.
Oh, she would love it. She would love it.
Dave, I don't think a day goes by where all of us at Champion aren't jealous of something that Dave Tilley can do. So it's not that we.
Yeah, Dave's one of those guys too that just like is good at everything.
Yeah,
it's like whether it's his DJ skills or his his dancing or his fire poi. He does like the dude is just like a circus act. Waiting for the next Cirque du Soleil to open up.
Well, Tilley's great. He's great at the Olympic lifts as well, man. He moves very well with the barbell.
He's a very impressive dude. He probably won't listen to this, so he won't get too big of a head from hearing that. Second question. Anybody you think we should have on the podcast that would be a great guest?
Oh, what do you think, Dan? I mean, I assume Tilley's already been on. We've floated his ego enough, but
right.
Oh man, that's hard. I didn't think about this one at all. What kind of flavor are you trying to get?
Anything.
Really, anything. We want people in the technique world who are extremely good at what they do.
Preferably someone that will say weightlifting to that last question, but
yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the sleep and health type folks. I've always really liked that. It's probably the biggest passion for me is health from a very early age. Although I kind of like performance and people know me for physical therapy. I think it's Andrew Huberman. You guys followed him?
Oh yeah,
on the Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
He's pretty interesting. I've been following him a bit, and I think he's trying to build himself. So that might be a good person to have on the podcast, expose it to more fitness folks that could really benefit from it. So
I think we'll give it a try. I know he just started his own podcast fairly recently too. Yep.
I think recovery is a good thing that your listeners are going to be interested in. Recovery is getting huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're focusing a lot more on it with like vibration technology and like Normatec boots and just tracking things and, like HRV and stuff. So recovery base is probably, the next wave of performance in my mind.
Yeah, you guys are right in the heart of it with Whoop being in the Boston area too. And it seems like Boston area is just swamped with fitness related brands and companies that are popping up. You guys are in the heart of it all over there.
Yeah. And COVID vaccinations with Moderna.
Yeah.
That's true.
Saving the world, Boston.
and oftentimes super spreader events. So we're leading the league in many, many things here.
I think Moderna probably started that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my. Well, before we get off on a tangent, somebody gets off on a tangent on COVID, let's ask the last questions here. Is there any books that either of you guys have come across here recently that you might recommend?
Well, I always tell everybody, I think the most important book that I've ever read that I recommend everybody reads is just Start With Why, right? So, just essentially the concept of making sure you always have a good, strong foundation behind your thought process and how to articulate that and get that across. So that's like a Simon Sinek, I believe, book. But Start With Why is, to me, is a mandatory read for pretty much every field.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Perfect.
Gosh, I read so much weird stuff. I just looked at my Audible to see what I have.
Give us the most weird here real quick. Or weirdest. Is it most weird or weirdest? I don't know.
Yeah, this one, I have a baby boy, so you guys know that. So it's a little less weird. But I'm reading, actually, I've read a few from her. Her name is Diane Poole Heller, and she writes a lot about attachment and basically how babies learn to be the way they are emotionally, and then how it affects communication, interactions, behaviors throughout the course of life. And I think it's actually pretty relevant as a coach. I think coach, physical therapist, just understanding and having empathy for other people and kind of getting an idea of why they act and behave the way they do, as opposed to kind of letting our egos get in the way and getting upset or mad at whatever they're saying because we had this way of being brought up, over the course of our lifespan. So that one's a pretty cool, weird one if you want that. Obviously, I'm not trying to screw my kid up. So The Power of Attachment, Diane Poole-Heller. It's a new one. She actually has a few that are good. That's her newest. So just trying to make sure Luke is well adjusted. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's perfect. That sounds very interesting, Dan, for sure. And I think we're all a little messed up, at least from something here and there in our childhood, right? I think I heard before where adulthood is just trying to overcome your childhood, right? Not that we all had bad ones, but that's what it's all about. So that sounds really good. Before we get out of here, guys, first of all, I really appreciate both of you coming on. Mike, it was great to get to know you a little bit more. And I have 3 or 4 more questions here that I wanted to ask you. So we may have to have you back on for sure, because we didn't get too far. And I know that Dave probably had some other ones as well. But either of you have anything coming up you want folks to know about, or any parting words?
No,
I think there's big ones for Mike.
I was gonna say I'm easy. Just head to MikeReinold.com, my website. We have a podcast that Dan's a part of where we ask a lot of questions. It's very rehab based, but there's a lot of fitness professionals that really enjoy our content. So we're easy to find online. Just head to our websites, that sort of thing. But other than that, not really.
Perfect.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Anything that's fitness pain free, fitnesspainfree.com is our website. I'm on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook. I'm not very good at that, but yeah, if you're trying to learn anything related to keeping your fitness athletes healthy or knowing how to work with fitness athletes once they're injured and getting them back, is kind of what I do. That's my main thing. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, as we, have mentioned a number of times, I certainly take a lot of what I learned from you at camp and just by following your Instagram into my coaching and my programming, and using your Power Monkey videos, those mobility drills all the time in my programming. So appreciate everything that both of you guys do. So to our listeners, be sure you guys check them out if you haven't already. Also, be sure to head over to PowerMonkeyFitness.com for services and upcoming events. We've got Power Monkey Camp number 15, Dave?
Yep, 15 coming up in a few weeks.
Here in just a few weeks. Any updates on this camp or the following camp or anything else Power Monkey related?
Nothing more than we are hosting them with everything going on. We have a lot of COVID protocols in place. So if you are on the fence, I would highly recommend signing up. There are spots available for both fall and spring, and the next one is May 2nd through the 8th, followed by September 27th, October 2nd. So you can sign up for both at powermonkeycamp.com.
Perfect. And also, guys, as always, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.